On September 12th, the narrative of human history was irrevocably altered, not by a ground-based telescope peering into the void, but by a veteran spacecraft stationed nearly 1 million miles from Earth. The Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, SOHO, had been a faithful solar sentinel for decades, its purpose to watch our star. But it carried an instrument named the Solar Wind Anisotropies, or SWAN, camera, which saw the sky in a unique way, mapping the faint ultraviolet glow of cosmic hydrogen. On that day, its automated systems flagged a new source of this light, a source that had not been there the day before. It was not a faint smudge, but a colossal and rapidly expanding bloom that initially overwhelmed the instrument's sensors. An urgent alert was immediately dispatched from the SOHO Operations Center to comet tracking communities worldwide. The coordinates pointed toward the constellation Aquarius, a region of the sky that had been thoroughly surveyed and showed nothing of interest. Yet when the first optical telescopes were slewed to the location, the discovery was immediate, breathtaking, and deeply unsettling. There, moving with impossible speed, was a new object, not a faint, distant speck, but an entity of immense scale and brilliance. It was officially designated C/2025 R2, or SWAN, in honor of the instrument that had first sensed its presence. It had not been tracked on a long, slow approach from the outer solar system. It had, for all intents and purposes, simply materialized, streaking in from deep space with a speed and energy that dwarfed any natural comet ever recorded. The new object's sudden arrival was a profound shock, precisely because it defied the established methods of detection. For an object to become so bright so quickly, it had to be both extraordinarily large and highly active, shedding a truly staggering volume of gas and dust. The prevailing theory was that its approach had been masked, its trajectory perhaps hidden behind the glare of a bright star or the dense star fields of the Milky Way, until it crossed a threshold where its interaction with the solar wind caused it to flare into prominence with astonishing speed. Its arrival was a cosmic pronouncement, a sudden and powerful announcement that left observers stunned and scrambling to understand what they were seeing. This discovery instantly became the single most urgent mystery on the planet. Humanity was now faced with a formidable visitor that had appeared out of the void with characteristics that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The scientific landscape was transformed overnight, from a state of relative calm into the observation of a developing cosmic scenario. The most pressing question in the world was simple, yet profound. What was this new object, and why was it here now? In the hours and days following its shocking appearance, the true, mind-bending scale of the new object began to come into focus. The initial measurements returned from the world's observatories were so extreme, they were subject to immediate, frantic verification. The first and most visually arresting feature was its tail. It was measured to span an incredible 2.5 degrees of the night sky. For comparison, the full moon occupies a mere half degree. This new visitor's tail was a luminous, ethereal banner stretched across a section of the heavens 5 times wider than the moon. A celestial structure of unprecedented size, visible even in moderately light-polluted skies. This colossal visual presence was a direct result of its second, record-breaking characteristic, its brightness. The object registered an apparent magnitude of 7.4. While this placed it just beyond the technical threshold of naked-eye visibility, it put it well within the easy reach of even the most basic binoculars or a small amateur telescope. This single fact had a profound and democratizing effect on the event. Unlike most faint, distant discoveries that remain the exclusive domain of professional astronomers, SWAN was a spectacle for the world. Millions of citizen scientists and backyard astronomers turned their own lenses to the sky, confirming its presence and bearing personal witness to the arrival of this cosmic titan. The source of this immense brightness was the object's coma, the glowing shroud of gas and dust immediately surrounding its unseen nucleus. This coma was a seething, intensely energetic sphere, a miniature sun in its own right, powered by the violent outgassing of its core. It was this feature that had allowed the instrument of the same name to detect it so suddenly. The cloud of hydrogen it was shedding was larger than our own Sun. The sheer volume of material being ejected into space was difficult to comprehend, suggesting an internal energy source or a reaction to the solar environment that far surpassed anything previously documented. These observations, taken together, painted a portrait of an object that was not merely large, but fundamentally different from any known comet from our own Oort cloud. The energy required to sublimate that much material and create a structure of that size and brightness pointed to a nucleus of truly colossal proportions, a body potentially hundreds of kilometers in diameter, making it more akin to a small planet than a typical comet. Its brightness was not just reflected sunlight, it was the raw, incandescent output of its own prodigious activity. The arrival of SWAN was not a subtle astronomical event. It was a brute force announcement, a declaration of presence written in glowing gas across a vast swath of the sky.
In the lexicon of astronomy, objects are given designations, not names. They are catalogued with functional, sterile labels for scientific discourse. But some objects, through their sheer character and presence, defy such clinical classification and earn monikers, names bestowed upon them by the community of observers that better capture their essence. It did not take long for SWAN to acquire such a title. Within the vibrant online forums where astronomers converged, a consensus began to form. Given its sheer size, its incredible power output, and its profound, defiant resilience against the sun's destructive heat, it earned a nickname that was both fitting and ominous: the Fortress. The most critical element that cemented this name was its predicted interaction with the sun. The Fortress was on a sun-grazing trajectory, a path that would take it perilously close to the solar surface. For any normal comet, such a path is a death sentence. The intense gravitational tidal forces and the ferocious onslaught of solar radiation typically cause such bodies to fracture and disintegrate, a process observed time and time again. Astronomers call this the Roche limit, a theoretical boundary inside which a celestial body, held together only by its own gravity, will be torn apart. The Fortress was headed deep inside this kill zone. Yet, every model of its structure and energy output suggested that it would survive the passage, its gravitational integrity simply too immense to be easily broken on the celestial anvil of the sun. Furthermore, its prodigious outgassing, the very source of its brilliance, was reinterpreted in light of this trajectory.
It wasn't just a passive shedding of material, it was beginning to be seen as a functional, protective mechanism. The immense cloud of gas and dust surrounding its nucleus acted as a form of natural, ablative shielding, absorbing and deflecting the worst of the incoming solar radiation. The object was using its own substance to create a temporary, regenerative atmosphere, a buffer against the hellish environment of the inner corona. And so, the name stuck. The Fortress ceased to be mere slang and became the de facto term for the object. It perfectly encapsulated its defining characteristics: its immense scale, its imperviousness, and its overwhelming power. It implied a sense of purpose and design, for fortresses are not natural formations, they are built to protect something, to withstand a siege, or to project power. The name carried with it a host of new, deeply troubling questions. Why would such a colossal, resilient object be required? The arrival of the Fortress had transformed the cosmic landscape, and its very nature suggested a purpose far more significant than mere exploration.
The confirmation that two separate, apparently artificial interstellar objects were occupying the same solar system at the same time marked the definitive end of a scientific era that had lasted only a few short months. The arrival of the Fortress was not merely an addition to the existing puzzle of ATLAS, it was a fundamental alteration of the puzzle's very fabric. The intellectual and scientific resources of the world were now abruptly and violently retasked. The appearance of this second object transformed the scientific landscape from the study of a single anomaly to the observation of a potential cosmic event. This new reality created a palpable sense of urgency that had not existed before. The observation of Atlas had been a patient, academic pursuit, a long-term study of a slow-moving target. But the sudden arrival of the Fortress turned the situation into a dynamic, rapidly evolving scenario. The pace of discovery accelerated from a contemplative marathon to a frantic sprint. Teams of scientists worked around the clock, their work fueled by a mixture of exhilaration and a deep, underlying apprehension. The feeling was that humanity was no longer a passive observer of a cosmic curiosity, but was now a witness to the opening act of an unknown and potentially momentous drama, unfolding in its own cosmic backyard. The very atmosphere of the investigation changed. The initial sense of wonder that had defined the study of ATLAS was now tinged with a distinct sense of unease. The presence of one artificial probe could be interpreted as exploration. The arrival of a second, Fortress-class object alongside it felt like something else entirely. It suggested a purpose, a plan, and a level of celestial engineering that was far beyond mere reconnaissance. The mystery was no longer new. It was now urgent, its implications reaching far beyond the quiet halls of academia and into the very core of humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. The sudden and spectacular arrival of the Fortress instantly became the greatest astronomical event in modern history. But what made its appearance truly paradigm-shattering was that, incredibly, it was not the only anomalous interstellar object currently in our solar system. For months prior to this event, a quiet and deeply strange mystery had already been unfolding within the global astronomy community. Since July 1st, they had been tracking another confirmed visitor from beyond our solar system, an object designated 3I/ATLAS. Detected by the ATLAS survey telescope in Chile, its strange hyperbolic trajectory had marked it as a priority for observation, and for a time, it was considered a unique, once-in-a-lifetime encounter with a messenger from a distant star. The existence of this second object, now completely overshadowed by the brilliant arrival of the Fortress, had already been a source of profound scientific debate. As observatories around the world had analysed the faint light from ATLAS, they had uncovered a chemical signature that did not align with any known natural comet or asteroid. Its coma, the cloud of gas surrounding its nucleus, was found to be dominated by nickel, yet it was perplexingly deficient in iron. This composition is a profound violation of known cosmic chemistry, as the two elements are almost always found together. The data suggested a body of refined material, a composition more akin to an industrially produced alloy than to the random debris of cosmic formation. Furthermore, as astrometrists had meticulously plotted its path, they found that ATLAS was moving ever so slightly faster than gravity alone could account for. This non-gravitational acceleration was not the result of cometary outgassing. Detailed analysis showed no signs of the requisite jets of vaporized ice. Instead, the object had been observed making small, controlled bursts of acceleration. It was a behavior that spoke not of a random natural process, but of a controlled and deliberate one, the signature of a system designed for navigation. The evidence had already led to an extraordinary but inescapable conclusion. ATLAS was not a natural object, but an active, operational probe under some form of propulsion. Until the arrival of the Fortress, this probe had been considered a lone enigma. Its presence was a singular mystery, a quiet vessel whose secrets scientists were eager to uncover as it drew closer. It had been the focus of intense, if quiet, study. But now, this pre-existing anomaly was cast in a stunning new light. The sudden appearance of the colossal Fortress transformed the scientific landscape, from the study of a single strange probe to the urgent observation of a developing cosmic event. The world was no longer dealing with one interstellar mystery, it was now dealing with two, and the most pressing question of all had become terrifyingly obvious. Was it a coincidence that they were both here at the same time? The mystery of Atlas, which had been developing for months before the arrival of the Fortress, was rooted not just in its interstellar origin, but in its very substance. As the world's great observatories had studied the faint ancient light coming from the object, they had channeled it into the precise mechanisms of spectrographs.
These instruments break down light into a spectrum that holds the hidden chemical fingerprints of the object's composition. Scientists had expected to see the familiar signatures of water ice, silicates, and carbon compounds, the common building blocks of comets and asteroids. What they found instead had already begun to dismantle every preconceived notion about interstellar visitors. The initial data was so unusual that it was first treated as a potential error. There was an unequivocally strong spectral signature of nickel. While nickel is a common element in the cosmos, particularly in the iron-heavy cores of rocky planets, it is almost never seen in such a dominant and isolated state in the coma of a celestial body. The readings suggested that as Atlas was warmed by the distant sun, it was shedding a cloud of vaporized material that was perplexingly rich in this one specific metal. This discovery was the first thread pulled from the tapestry of understanding, a thread that would soon unravel the entire picture of the object. The true depth of the anomaly, however, was not in what was present, but in what was absent. In the universe's great stellar forges, nickel and iron are cosmic twins, almost always forged together in predictable ratios. Following the detection of such a strong nickel signature, every team of spectroscopists had searched for the corresponding, and expectedly much stronger, signature of iron. The result remained stubbornly, impossibly the same. There was virtually no iron to be found. This finding was a profound violation of known cosmic chemistry, a result so far outside the bounds of established models that it bordered on the fantastical. This inexplicable composition had already forced the scientific community into a period of intense and challenging deliberation. When all natural explanations failed to account for the evidence, a revolutionary hypothesis had begun to take hold. Long before the fortress ever appeared, the composition of ATLAS was not natural, but artificial. The nickel-rich, iron-poor signature was not a freak of nature, but a feature of a refined alloy. This had already shifted the object from a curiosity to a suspected artifact. Now, with the arrival of a second, colossal visitor, this old evidence took on a chilling new significance. The probe that was already in our system was not just a probe, it was a probe made of something alien and manufactured.
The bizarre, seemingly manufactured composition of ATLAS was only the first of the mysteries that had surrounded it for months. A second, equally compelling body of evidence for its artificial nature came from the simple act of watching where it was going. Astrometrists, the meticulous timekeepers of the cosmos, had been plotting its precise position against the fixed backdrop of distant stars, creating an orbital model based on the unyielding laws of gravity. As Atlas drew closer to the Sun, tiny but persistent discrepancies began to appear. The object was not exactly where it was supposed to be. It was moving ever so slightly faster than gravity alone could account for. This phenomenon, known as non-gravitational acceleration, is a hallmark of comets. The process of outgassing, where solar heating turns ice into jets of vapor, can act like miniature rocket thrusters. This was the first and most logical hypothesis, but research teams had already focused their instruments, searching for the telltale signs of these cometary jets, the bright plumes of dust and gas that should be erupting from its surface. The search had yielded nothing. The data was a stark and resounding null result. There were no visible jets, and the object's already strange metallic coma showed no evidence of the vast quantities of water vapor needed to produce the observed level of acceleration. The final and perhaps most conclusive piece of this puzzle came from the detailed analysis of the acceleration's character. It was not the continuous, chaotic push one would expect from a naturally outgassing comet. Instead, the velocity changes were observed to occur in small, discrete, and remarkably precise bursts. For weeks, Atlas would follow its gravitational path with flawless predictability, and then, for a brief period, a tiny course correction would be registered, after which it would settle onto a new, equally predictable trajectory. It was the signature of a system designed for navigation, a series of calculated mid-course correction burns. With this discovery, the evidence had reached a critical mass long before the fortress arrived, forcing a conclusion that was as inescapable as it was extraordinary. Atlas was an active, operational probe. Its metallic composition was its chassis, and its unexplained acceleration was the evidence of its propulsion system at work. It was an intelligently guided explorer from an unknown origin, navigating through our solar system with a clear, albeit unknown, purpose. This prior knowledge, now set against the sudden appearance of the colossal SWAN, made the unfolding situation infinitely more complex. One artificial object was a mystery, but two suggested a plan. So, for months, the global scientific community had been observing what it considered to be the single greatest discovery in human history. The evidence for the artificial composition of ATLAS, combined with the undeniable signature of a controlled propulsion system, had solidified into a new shared reality. Humanity was tracking an operational, non-human probe as it navigated the inner solar system. This conclusion, as vast and unsettling as it was, had become the new foundation upon which all further observation was built. The object was no longer just the subject of scientific curiosity. It had become a cosmic focal point, a silent and solitary vessel whose very existence posed the most fundamental questions a species could ask. This understanding had galvanized a global effort of unprecedented scale and unity. Data was shared freely and instantly across a global network, with teams in Chile, Hawaii, and Spain coordinating their observations to maintain a continuous, unbroken watch. It was a moment of pure collaborative science. Yet, for all the intense scrutiny, ATLAS itself remained profoundly, unnervingly silent. It broadcasted no signals, emitted no identifiable communications, and gave no indication that it was even aware of the fledgling technological civilization whose star it was approaching. It simply executed its programmed course with a quiet, indifferent precision. And so, until the second week of September 2025, this was the complete picture. The story of Atlas was that of a unique, once-in-all-of-history event. It was a singular anomaly, a lone actor on the cosmic stage. The global conversation revolved around it, the scientific community was consumed by it, and the collective imagination of humanity was captivated by it. The world held its breath, waiting for the object's closest approach, the moment when the most detailed observations could be made. It was universally believed that whatever secrets this strange visitor held, it held them alone. This was the calm, focused state of understanding, the quiet before the storm. The narrative was simple and clean. A solitary probe from another star had arrived, and it was up to humanity to decipher its meaning. But with the sudden, brilliant arrival of the fortress, this entire context was shattered. The lone enigma was no longer alone, and the profound mystery that had held the world in its grip for months was instantly transformed into the secondary act of a much larger and far more urgent cosmic drama. With the urgent reality of two simultaneous interstellar visitors now firmly established, the global scientific effort focused on a single burning question. What was their connection? The most direct way to answer this was to meticulously compare their trajectories. The path of ATLAS was a known quantity, the result of months of careful tracking. Its radiant, the point in the sky from which it appeared to originate, was firmly located in the direction of the constellation Sagittarius, toward the dense, star-rich core of our Milky Way galaxy. The great unknown was the origin of the fortress. As powerful computer systems processed the flood of new positional data on SWAN, they plotted its path backward in time. The result of this calculation, when it was finalized and triple-checked, would unveil a truth so profound that it would elevate the entire event from a mystery to a matter of undeniable, intelligent design. The trajectory of the fortress was confirmed to be coming from the opposite direction of the sky. Its radiant was located in the constellation Aquarius, a region almost directly opposite to Sagittarius. This single piece of data was of monumental importance. It was the definitive, irrefutable proof that these two objects were not related by a common physical origin. They were not fragments of a single parent body that had broken apart long ago. This discovery immediately and completely nullified the simplest potential explanation for their concurrent arrival. They were two completely distinct and unrelated entities that had journeyed from separate, distant points in the galaxy. One had come from the galactic core, the other from the galactic rim. Their paths were not parallel, they were convergent. This realization fundamentally recontextualized the entire event. The evidence now pointed overwhelmingly to a planned encounter, a pre-arranged meeting. The odds of two independent interstellar objects from opposite ends of the galaxy entering our solar system on converging paths at roughly the same time by sheer coincidence are so infinitesimally, vanishingly minuscule as to be statistically indistinguishable from zero. It was the cosmic equivalent of two specific grains of sand, one from the Gobi Desert and one from the Sahara, being carried by the wind and landing on the same square inch of a beach in Australia at the exact same moment. It was not chance, it was arrangement. The implications of this were staggering, for it meant that the objects were not just vessels, they were envoys, and they were on a schedule. The discovery that the two interstellar visitors were approaching from opposite ends of the sky was a profound revelation, but it was only one half of a far more intricate and disturbing equation. The question of where they were coming from had been answered. Now, the full attention of orbital dynamicists turned to the equally critical question of when they would arrive. In the precise language of celestial mechanics, the most significant moment of any object's journey through our solar system is its perihelion, the point in its orbit where it makes its closest approach to the Sun. It is the moment of maximum gravitational stress and solar energy, the dramatic climax of any celestial passage, and it can be calculated with near-perfect accuracy. Separate teams, using independent datasets and different computational models, worked to project the exact perihelion dates for both ATLAS and the Fortress. The results, when they were confirmed and cross-referenced, delivered the final decisive blow to the theory of cosmic chance. The smaller probe, ATLAS, was projected to reach its perihelion on October 15, 2025. The colossal Fortress, SWAN, was scheduled to reach its own perihelion just 7 days later, on October 22nd. They were slated to arrive at the heart of our solar system, their point of closest approach to our star, within a mere 1-week window. To fully grasp the improbability of this, one must consider the scales involved. These objects have likely travelled for millions of years across unfathomable distances, their journeys subject to the faint but persistent gravitational nudges of countless stars and nebulae, for their independent paths to converge not just in the same tiny volume of space, but also within the same infinitesimally small sliver of time, is a feat of timing that defies any natural explanation. It is a display of celestial choreography so precise that it implies a shared, underlying timescale. A mission clock that was synchronized in two different star systems thousands of years ago. This synchronized arrival was the piece of evidence that unified the disparate, strange facts into a single, cohesive, and chilling narrative. The artificial nature of ATLAS, the impossible scale of the Fortress, and their opposite origins, all of these were now understood not as separate mysteries, but as related components of a single, deliberate event. The statistical argument was now complete and unassailable. The probability of this happening by chance was a number so close to zero that it had no practical meaning in the real world. The scientific community was forced to discard the language of coincidence and adopt the language of intent. This was not an encounter, it was a rendezvous. With the rendezvous now established as a statistical certainty, a new and urgent imperative gripped the global scientific community: to prepare for the observation of the event itself. The critical window in mid-October was marked on every calendar, a period destined to become the most intensely studied week in the history of astronomy. The world's most powerful instruments were being prepared to capture every photon, every radio wave, every possible shred of data from the encounter. But as the final, precise orbital mechanics were calculated, a new, horrifying detail emerged from the cold logic of celestial geometry, a detail that would render all of these preparations useless. As astronomers plotted the relative positions of the Earth, the Sun, and the two objects during that crucial week, they unveiled a stunning alignment. The calculations showed that at the precise moment of their closest approach to one another, the Sun would be positioned directly between the Earth and the two visitors. This is an astronomical event known as a solar conjunction. For observers on Earth, it meant that the objects would pass directly behind the Sun, their faint light completely and utterly consumed by the blinding glare of our own star. It was the ultimate cosmic blind spot.
A solar conjunction is more than just a visual obstruction. It is a total information blackout. The Sun is not a quiet star. It is a raging, turbulent ball of plasma that floods the solar system with a deafening roar of electromagnetic radiation. During a conjunction, not only are optical telescopes rendered useless, but radio telescopes, our celestial ears, are equally blinded, their sensitive receivers overwhelmed by the sheer power of the Sun's broadcast. There would be no way to see the rendezvous, no way to listen for any potential energy signatures or communications, no way to gather any data at all. From our vantage point on Earth, the event would be happening behind an impenetrable curtain of light and radiation. This observational blackout was not a fleeting moment. The orbital models showed that the window of this solar conjunction would begin on October 8th and would not end until October 18th. This 10-day period was not a random coincidence. It perfectly, and with terrifying precision, bracketed the exact window of the rendezvous, including the perihelion of Atlas on the 15th. The timing was too good, the alignment too precise. It was one impossible coincidence layered upon another, suggesting that the planners had not only calculated their own interstellar trajectories to arrive at the same place at the same time, but had also factored in the orbital position of Earth to ensure their meeting would happen in secret. The chilling realization that the rendezvous was intentionally shielded from view forced a final, fundamental re-evaluation of the entire event. It irrevocably shifted the perception of the Sun's role in this cosmic drama. Our star was no longer a passive backdrop, a mere source of gravity against which the events would unfold. Instead, the evidence now overwhelmingly suggested that the Sun itself was the destination. It was the centerpiece, the objective, the designated ground for this meticulously planned meeting. The very reasons that made it an observational blind spot for humanity were the same reasons that made it the perfect, logical, and perhaps only possible location for their interaction. From a purely navigational standpoint, for two travelers journeying across the vast and largely featureless expanse of interstellar space, a star is the ultimate landmark. It is the great lighthouse of the void, a beacon of immense and unwavering power. For two entities arriving from opposite ends of the galaxy with the goal of meeting at a precise point in space and time, the primary star of the target system is the most obvious and unambiguous coordinate imaginable. The Sun was, in the simplest terms, the X on their cosmic map, a destination of such prominence that it could not be missed. But the logic of this choice runs far deeper than mere navigation. For a technology capable of interstellar travel, a star is a resource of almost infinite potential. The sheer, unimaginable energies at play in the solar corona represent a power source that dwarfs anything a vessel could carry with it. Speculation quickly coalesced around the most obvious of these possibilities: refueling. The Fortress, with its demonstrated resilience, was seen as a vessel purpose-built to plunge into this cosmic crucible, to harvest hydrogen isotopes, or to use the Sun's colossal magnetic fields to recharge its energy systems. The Sun was not just their meeting point, it was their power station. Beyond raw power, The chaotic electromagnetic environment of the Sun could serve as the perfect cover for a massive exchange of information. Any powerful transmissions between the two objects, a transfer of data gathered by the ATLAS probe to the fortress, for instance, would be completely masked from any outside observers by the Sun's own deafening radio noise. They could perform their data transfer in complete privacy, using the star's broadcast as a form of natural encryption. The Sun was a nexus, a multi-purpose facility that offered everything needed for their clandestine rendezvous: a clear target, a limitless energy source, and a secure shield for their communications.
With the observational blackout now an unbreachable reality, the nature of the scientific endeavour was forced to change. The age of direct data collection was, for a crucial period, over. In its place, an age of intense theoretical modelling began. The known facts, the two distinct objects, their artificial characteristics, their impossible convergence, and their clandestine rendezvous, became the foundational axioms in a grand exercise of cosmic deduction. The central question was no longer what they were, but why they were here together. In the quiet hum of supercomputers, the first and most widely considered hypothesis began to take shape: the support scenario. This theory, in its essence, is a model of logical and efficient mission architecture. It posits a hierarchical and cooperative relationship between the two visitors. In this view, the colossal fortress, SWAN, is the primary vessel, a mothership, a carrier, or a mobile base of operations. The smaller, more agile object, ATLAS, is a subordinate component of the mission, a long-range drone or a specialized reconnaissance unit. Their meeting was not an encounter between equals, but the carefully orchestrated reunion of a mothership and its deployed asset. This explanation was compelling because it was an interstellar extension of a strategic logic that humanity itself employs. Within this framework, the distinct characteristics of each object suddenly made perfect sense. Atlas, the probe, was built for its specific task: a long, lonely journey to survey a target system. Its journey, however, would have inevitably depleted its power reserves. The fortress, in turn, was built for an entirely different purpose. It was the logistical heart of the mission, the carrier that possessed the power generation and repair facilities that the smaller drone lacked. It did not need to be fast or stealthy. It needed to be a self-sufficient, resilient haven, capable of supporting its assets and enduring the harshest cosmic environments. The support scenario elegantly explains every major piece of the observational puzzle. The synchronized arrival is the natural consequence of a mothership moving to a designated point to retrieve a probe. The rendezvous at the Sun is also perfectly explained as the ideal location to perform the three critical tasks of refueling, data transfer, and repair. While this theory presented a non-hostile interpretation, its implications were no less staggering. It painted a picture of an intelligence that operates with a level of patience and foresight that is almost geological in its scale, planning missions not in years or decades, but across millennia. In this scenario, humanity is not a target. We are simply the inhabitants of a location of interest. For every elegant theory that explains a set of facts, there often exists a shadow, a disquieting counter-narrative that fits the same evidence but leads to a far more unsettling conclusion. While the support scenario offered a vision of methodical logistics, a darker possibility began to be considered. This alternative view held that the meeting at the Sun was not a cooperative rendezvous, but a hostile interception. It proposed that the two objects were not partners in a shared mission, but adversaries at the end of a long and determined pursuit. This was the interception scenario, and it recast the entire event in the grim light of a potential conflict. In this far more hostile interpretation, the roles of the two objects are dramatically and violently inverted. The smaller probe, ATLAS, is not a loyal drone. It is a rogue, a fugitive, a defector carrying something of immense value or danger. Its precise, controlled burns are not mid-course corrections. They are evasive maneuvers, subtle attempts to alter its trajectory and escape a pursuer.
Its journey to our solar system was not a mission of exploration. It was a flight to a sanctuary, a place it hoped it would not be followed. From this perspective, the Fortress is no longer a nurturing mothership. It is an enforcer, a pursuer, a celestial weapon system dispatched to hunt down and neutralize the rogue asset. Its immense size and power, which seemed like logistical overkill in the support scenario, now appear perfectly proportional to its task. It is a vessel built not just to endure the rigors of space, but to project force and to ensure the successful capture or destruction of its target. Its sudden high-energy arrival was not a grand entrance, but the final, closing phase of a long chase. Every piece of evidence that so meekly supported the first theory could be reread to support this one with equal coherence. The arrival from opposite ends of the sky is no longer a coordinated plan, but the inexorable logic of pursuit and ambush, cutting the target off at a pre-calculated choke point. The synchronized timing is not a schedule for a meeting, it is the precise closing of a trap. And the solar conjunction blackout, a feature that suggested a desire for privacy in the first scenario, now takes on a truly sinister meaning. It is the perfect kill box, a location chosen not just to hide a data transfer, but to hide an execution, conducted beyond the sight of any potential witnesses, a category that now included the entire human race.
As the theoretical battle between the support and interception scenarios raged, a third and perhaps even more profound line of inquiry was being pursued by a small, interdisciplinary group of researchers. They were focused on a single, astonishing piece of data that had emerged from the orbital calculations of the Fortress: its period. The models showed that SWAN was not a one-time visitor on a hyperbolic escape path. It was in a vast, impossibly long elliptical orbit, a recurring celestial ghost bound to our Sun. Its calculated orbital period was 22,554 years. This number, once confirmed, acted as a key, unlocking a door that led not outwards into the void of space, but backwards, into the deepest, most enigmatic chapters of the human story. The researchers traced the orbit back one full cycle, calculating the time of its last perihelion passage. The date they arrived at was roughly 20,500 BCE, placing its last visit squarely at the end of the last great ice age. This was a different world, a planet emerging from a deep freeze, a time of catastrophic floods from melting glaciers, and vast herds of megafauna. Our ancestors, organized in nomadic hunter-gatherer societies, were witnessing a world in profound, violent transition. It was in this specific, tumultuous epoch that the Fortress last blazed across the skies of Earth, a spectacle that would have dwarfed any other celestial event, a terrifying and unforgettable star in the prehistoric night. This temporal alignment gained profound significance when juxtaposed with one of archaeology's most enduring anomalies, the site known as Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey. This complex of massive, T-shaped monolithic pillars, elaborately carved with animals, was built around 9,500 BCE, an anachronism constructed by a non-agricultural society. The theory proposes that the site may be a form of memorial, an observatory built by the descendants of those who witnessed the fortress's last terrifying arrival. Perhaps the carvings are not just depictions of animals, but a form of celestial cartography, a pictographic record of the constellations and the great, star-like object that had appeared among them. This perspective recasts the entire narrative. The arrival of the fortress is no longer a singular, unprecedented event in human history. It is a recurring pattern in deep time, a cyclical visitor whose return has been witnessed by our distant ancestors. It suggests that the very dawn of civilization may have been influenced or even catalyzed by the memory of this awesome and terrifying celestial being. The mystery of the fortress was not just unfolding in the heavens above. Its echoes could be found right here on Earth, in the enigmatic stones of our most ancient ruins. The rendezvous at the Sun was not just a meeting between two interstellar objects.
It was the return of a cosmic entity that may have shaped the very course of human destiny.
In the final critical days leading up to the solar conjunction, as Atlas and the Fortress made their final approach, a new and deeply chilling phenomenon began to manifest. Not in the sky, but here on the ground. The very institutions that had led the world in studying the visitors, the great space agencies of NASA, the ESA, Roscosmos and others, began to fall silent. The steady, enthusiastic stream of press releases and data dumps that had characterized the initial months of discovery slowed to a trickle, and then, with a disquieting abruptness, ceased entirely. High-level astronomers became suddenly unavailable for comment, and publicly accessible data streams from key telescopes were taken offline under vague justifications of system-wide recalibration. A quiet, official reticence descended, creating an information vacuum that was, in its own way, as profound as the darkness of space itself. This sudden silence was not passive. It was an active and systematic curtailing of information. It fueled a storm of public speculation and anxiety, with theories ranging from a coordinated effort to prevent mass panic to a more sinister possibility: that a discovery had been made, a communication received, or a threat identified that was deemed too dangerous for public knowledge. The official narrative had ended, leaving humanity in the dark, both figuratively and, with the approaching conjunction, literally. The silence from the world's authorities was not reassuring. It was terrifying, for it implied that the truth of the situation had now become a matter of state security, not public science. But as the official gates of information swung shut, 1,000 unofficial windows were thrown open. The information lockdown spurred a massive, unprecedented and spontaneous citizen science effort. A global, decentralized network of amateur astronomers, independent researchers, and dedicated skywatchers rose to fill the void. Using their own powerful backyard telescopes and custom-built imaging rigs, they coordinated their efforts through encrypted online forums, creating a new, grassroots-level observatory that spanned the globe. For the first time, the primary source for tracking the most significant event in history was not a government agency, but the people themselves. This global network was now locked in a desperate race against time. They knew that the solar conjunction was an unmovable deadline, a final curtain call. Their frantic, around-the-clock observations represented humanity's final, fleeting glimpse of the two objects before they disappeared behind the sun. Every photon captured, every measurement shared was a small act of defiance against the official silence. They were the world's eyes and ears, the last sentinels standing watch before the long, blind night of the conjunction began. And so, as the final hours ticked away, a planet held its breath, left to stare into the glare of its own sun, and to wonder what, if anything, would emerge from the silence when the blackout finally ended. The solar conjunction began not with a sudden event, but with a slow, inexorable surrender to the light. The final, grainy images from the Citizen Science Network showed the two objects, ATLAS and the Fortress, fading into the brilliant, boiling corona of the sun before the data streams were completely overwhelmed by stellar radiation. Then, there was nothing. For the first time in months, no new information was available from any source on Earth. A profound and total silence descended, and the Great Vigil began. The 10 days that followed were a period of unparalleled global suspense, a time when the entire planet was united in a single shared act of waiting. This period was defined by a stark and revealing contrast. On one side, the official channels of governments and space agencies remained utterly mute. Their silence, which had begun as a trickle, was now a complete and deliberate dam against the flow of information. News channels, starved of new facts, were left to endlessly replay old simulations and host panels of experts who could only restate the two dominant theories, support or interception, with increasing philosophical weight. The official world had become a closed door,
offering no comfort and no insight, a policy that only deepened the public's gnawing uncertainty.
On the other side, the decentralized global network of citizen scientists entered its most feverish and vital phase. Their encrypted forums and data-sharing platforms became the de facto nerve center for a planet in waiting. Unable to gather new data, they turned inward, meticulously reanalyzing every scrap of information that had been collected before the blackout. They ran thousands of simulations, debating every possible outcome with a passion that bordered on the religious. These digital campfires burned 24 hours a day, a testament to a species desperate for answers, refusing to simply wait in the dark while its destiny was being decided light minutes away. As the days stretched on, the psychological weight of the vigil began to press down on the global consciousness. Daily life continued, but it was a life lived under the shadow of an invisible cosmic question mark. People looked at the daytime sun not with casual indifference, but with a new sense of awe and trepidation. The sun was no longer just a star, it was a veil, a curtain behind which the most important drama in history was unfolding. As the 10th day dawned, a palpable electric tension filled the air. Across the planet, the citizen network began to coordinate its efforts for the moment of first light, the instant the objects were predicted to emerge. Telescopes were calibrated, antennas were aimed, and a silent, global command was given: watch. The end of the conjunction arrived just as celestial mechanics had predicted, a slow and silent sunrise on the far side of the solar system. As the calculated moment arrived, the global network of citizen astronomers, a synchronized web of thousands of eyes, turned its gaze to the precise coordinates in the sky where the visitors were expected to re-emerge from the sun's blinding glare. The first returning signals were distorted, corrupted by the lingering wash of solar radiation. But as the minutes ticked by and the separation from the solar limb increased, the noise began to clear. The moment of truth was at hand. The initial reports that flickered across the network were confused, fragmented, and tinged with disbelief. The first clear optical images, captured by a high-altitude observatory in the Andes, were uploaded to the central servers, and a wave of profound, collective shock rippled through the community. The image was stark and unambiguous. Where there should have been 2 points of light, 2 distinct comas traveling in close proximity, there was only one. The brilliant, colossal form of the fortress was there, its magnificent tail streaming behind it, seemingly intact and undiminished by its fiery passage. But of the other, the smaller probe, there was no sign. A frantic, desperate search began. Automated search algorithms were run across a wide field of view, hunting for any trace of the missing object. Could its trajectory have been radically altered? Could it be hidden in the still blinding corona? For hours, the network held on to this hope, a belief that the probe was merely lost, not gone. But as the fortress moved further into the clear, dark sky, revealing the empty space around it, the terrible truth began to solidify. More powerful instruments from professional observatories, their official silence now irrelevant in the face of this new reality, confirmed the citizen network's findings. Every sensor, from radio to infrared to optical, delivered the same stark verdict. Only one object was emerging from the far side of the sun. The initial, breathtaking image was soon followed by a far more detailed analysis of the fortress itself, and this new data only deepened the mystery. Its trajectory had been altered. The change was subtle, a tiny deflection from its predicted path, but it was a change that could not be accounted for by the sun's gravity alone. It had the distinct signature of a mass change, an interaction, a dynamic event that had occurred while hidden behind the solar curtain. Something had happened back there. The disappearance of Atlas was not a simple vanishing act. It was the result of a physical process, a direct and purposeful interaction that had left its mark on the survivor. The long vigil was over, but the answer it provided only gave birth to a new and far more terrifying question. The initial shock of ATLAS's disappearance was swiftly replaced by a new frantic wave of scientific inquiry. Every available instrument, both professional and amateur, was turned once more to the lone survivor, the Fortress. If the smaller probe was truly gone, then the colossal object that emerged from the sun's glare held the only remaining clues to what had transpired. Scientists meticulously re-examined its trajectory, its energy output, and its very surface, searching for any subtle signature, any telltale mark of the interaction that had taken place. What they found solidified the dreadful truth, confirming humanity's worst fears. The detailed astrometric data, cross-referenced across dozens of observatories, confirmed the subtle but undeniable change in the Fortress's trajectory. It was not merely a deflection, it was a minute but precise shift, consistent with the dynamics of a high-energy interaction. The Fortress had either absorbed a significant mass or had undergone a powerful maneuver to achieve this new path. Spectroscopic analysis of its coma and surface yielded further perplexing data. The metallic composition remained, but there were faint, almost immeasurable traces of new elements, signatures that suggested a violent process of integration or consumption. The colossal object had not simply survived, it had engaged. The most poignant evidence, however, lay in the emptiness where ATLAS should have been. The global search for any remnant, any fragment, any sign of the smaller probe continued for days, expanding its field of view to enormous distances. But the void remained, stubbornly, terrifyingly empty. Only one faint, ephemeral trace could be found, stretching out along the initial re-emergence path of the Fortress, an incredibly tenuous cloud of highly dispersed metallic dust. It was a gossamer veil of nickel-iron particles, too diffuse to coalesce, too spread out to form a detectable body. It was all that remained, a silent, shimmering echo of a once active probe. This trail of dust offered a stark and unequivocal verdict. Atlas had not merely vanished, it had been utterly consumed, either disintegrated by an immense force or integrated directly into the Fortress itself. The two mission theories now faced a definitive answer. If it was a support scenario, it was a support of absorption, a retrieval that ended in complete assimilation, suggesting a highly advanced and perhaps ruthless form of technological reintegration. If it was an interception scenario, then the chase had ended in total victory for the pursuer. The killbox behind the sun had done its work with devastating efficiency. The silent metallic dust was the only witness to a cosmic act of either ultimate reunification or utter annihilation. The profound questions that had surrounded the interstellar visitors now condensed into a single, terrifying truth. Humanity had been granted a fleeting, accidental glimpse into the operational mechanics of an advanced galactic civilization. And what they had witnessed was either the ultimate act of interstellar logistics or the definitive end of an interstellar conflict. The Fortress, now alone, continued its trajectory, but its identity had been forever altered. It was no longer just a cosmic anomaly. It was a silent, moving monument to a terrible and unfathomable event. A titan that now carried the secrets of Atlas within its immense, impervious form. In the weeks and months that followed the rendezvous, the Fortress continued its silent, inexorable journey outward. Having completed its mysterious task, it moved with a calm, indifferent purpose, its great tail gradually fading as it receded from the sun's light and warmth. It offered no final signal, no parting message, no explanation for the events that had transpired. Its arrival had been a deafening roar of light and power, but its departure was a slow, quiet, and complete withdrawal. It was a cosmic entity returning to the great void from which it came. Its mission, whatever it was, concluded. On Earth, the aftermath was a new and permanent state of being.
The official silence was eventually broken, but the statements from world governments were hollow, confirming only what the citizen scientists had already revealed to a stunned planet. They had no answers, only the same evidence and the same two irreconcilable theories. The debate between the support and interception scenarios became the central philosophical question of the age, an unprovable argument that settled into the foundation of humanity's new worldview. We had been given a single, undeniable truth. We are not alone. But this truth was a lockbox with no key.
The old great question that had haunted humanity for centuries, are we alone in the universe, was now gone forever. It had been answered. But the answer had simply been replaced by a new set of questions, ones that were infinitely larger, more complex, and more terrifying. What is the nature of the power that operates in the void between the stars? What cosmic laws and allegiances govern the actions of beings who can schedule a meeting across millennia? And what is our place in a universe inhabited by such forces? We had learned that the cosmos was not empty, but in doing so, we had learned that we were unimaginably small. And so, the fortress faded from our most powerful telescopes, eventually becoming just another point of light, its 22,000-year orbit set to carry it away into the deep time from which it had emerged. It left behind a changed species, a civilization that could never again look at the night sky with the same sense of ownership or solitude. The silence that returned to the solar system was not the same silence that had preceded the event. It was no longer the quiet of an empty room. It was the great silence of a vast and ancient cathedral, a quiet filled with the profound, unspoken presence of immense and unknown things. And humanity was left to listen, not for a voice from the stars, but to the deep and newly resonant silence that now lay between them.